vous êtes, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, vous êtes, je t'aime, vous êtes, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré, vous êtes, je t'aime, vous êtes, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, my love, our weekly talk show about European affairs, today from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. On Brussels, my love, we take a look at some stories that hit the headlines this week, find out what is at stake for you and Europe. I'm your host, Stefan Grobe, sitting in for Maeve McMahon. Thank you for joining us here on the set and on TV and online. Coming up in this edition, this week, Europe commemorated the Allied victory over Nazi Germany 78 years ago, a monumental event that stood at the beginning of what would become European integration. Today, Europe is again shaken by war. The Russian attack against Ukraine has pushed the European Union out of its comfort zone, and nowhere is this more apparent than in Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse, where decades-old sacred political principles have gone overboard. Last year, Chancellor Olaf Scholz stood before his country's parliament and declared that Germany would undertake a Zeitenwende, or an epic turning point. This week, before the European Parliament, Scholz doubled down on this, saying that the future cannot be won by using policies of the past and advocating a more geopolitical approach for Europe. So, what does that mean for Europe? Is Berlin seeking a new leadership role? And the European Parliament ratified the Istanbul Convention, a comprehensive international legal agreement to fight violence against women and domestic violence. A long legislative process has finally come to an end, at least as far as the European Union is concerned. The Istanbul Convention was signed by the EU in 2017, 3 years after entering into force. Nonetheless, there are still 6 member states which believe that protecting women from physical violence is not worth the bother. Really? Let's bring in our panel and try to get answers. And we have Emma Wiesner, representing Renew Europe from Sweden, Robert Biedron, Socialists and Democrats from Poland, and Maria Walsh, European People's Party from Ireland. Welcome to all of you here on the set, and thanks for joining me here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. So, let's start with Germany. On Tuesday, Chancellor Olaf Scholz shared his ideas about Europe before the European Parliament. The country has abandoned decades-long political principles and adjusted to a new reality. Berlin is reworking its energy infrastructure after having spent years being dependent on Russia, and it is becoming a green energy power in the process. And Germany has become, albeit somewhat reluctantly at the beginning, one of the biggest military supporters of Ukraine. All this points to a more active Germany in Europe, a Europe that needs to play a bigger global role and that needs some urgent changes, according to the Chancellor. Here's what Scholz said. Take a listen.
We need to ensure Europe an appropriate place in the world of tomorrow, a place that is not greater or lesser than that of other countries and regions, but on an equal footing with others side by side. And in order to do that, the EU needs to change. We need a geopolitical European Union, an enlarged and reformed European Union, and last but not least, a European Union that is open to the future.
Yet many member states hesitate to accept German leadership, as Berlin has often turned off its partners by promoting its own interests in the guise of doing what's best for the EU. But who else could do the job? Macron's France? Poland? Doesn't sound realistic. What about Germany's leadership in Europe? Is it different than it was under Angela Merkel? Emma, I want to start with you.
I mean, starting to say that, of course, leadership role has changed since the war started, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that shifts the dynamic. And I think we have seen more of leadership or center of attention to the Eastern European member states, the one having long history of Russian involvement, so to say, Russian borders. At least in my political group, it's very evident that the Eastern European member states, often small member states, take now more of the spotlight, take more of lead, both when it comes to leadership of EU in general, but leading also the sanctioning of Russia, support for Ukraine, etc. And I think that's natural, and I think that's changing the dynamic of leadership in general of the Union.
So it's not like it was before. It's different. I guess that's what you're saying.
But I think maybe also with UK and Brexit, that also, of course, changed dynamic. The war changed the dynamic, and I think it's maybe for the good, because I'm from Sweden. It's one of the smaller member states, and this is a union, not a country. This is a union of member states, and I think this leaves room for power, for maneuver, also for other member states to take the spotlight, to show leadership, and we're building this union together. So I think maybe the question is phrased in the wrong way. Who is responsible for leadership? Well, we all are. This is a union of a European Union, so all member states need to show leadership. But I must say, maybe Scholz's rhetoric is not as other European member states. The German Merkel was also one of the more calmer politicians in their rhetorics, but I think he showed great leadership here. Me personally would have wanted to see more when it comes to climate action, more defending the European climate agenda. But other than that, I think he showed a lot of leadership when it comes to openness, economic growth, trade and partnerships. And we should not forget that Germany has done a lot in terms of replacing Russian energy, leading energy transition really fast.
Right. Robert, Poland has been mentioned. Your government has a kind of complicated relationship with any German government, I should say. How do you see things and the discussion about Germany's leadership role?
You put it very diplomatic on the relation of Poland with Germany and European Union. And I think we are losing as a country because of this approach, which is very confrontative towards European Union and Germany, and we are paying our price, because I would agree with Emma that all eyes on Poland and the countries neighboring with Ukraine, but and Poland would be a natural ambassador of the Ukrainian interest, and we try to be. But we weaken our position in European Union in the recent years because of this anti-European approach of the Polish current government. And that's why I really find the Olaf Scholz speech very well balanced and appropriate to what we would expect from the biggest country, biggest economy, and also biggest supporter of Ukraine within European Union. This is what we would expect from the leader, and I believe maybe, of course, it was not as emotional as Macron's speeches or other leaders' speeches, but this is Olaf Scholz. This is Germany. Germans are predictable. They well balanced. They have agenda which is well established, the stability of what he proposed, the responsibility which Germany also wants to take over. You mentioned Zeitenwende, this historical turning point to invest over 100 billion euro in military equipment. This is historical. Yeah. This will change Europe.
Okay. I want to bring in Maria now, coming from Ireland. In Germany, people put a premium on political consensus. There is a large political consensus between all democratic parties, I should say. And in the past, Germany has quite reluctantly accepted that it has become a European leader. How do you see things? I mean, Germany, the British government always thought that they had a partner in Merkel's government when it comes to the Brexit negotiations, but it wasn't. So Germany has shown a very pro-European stance. Is that what you're seeing and hearing?
Absolutely, and I would agree. I was born in America but raised in Ireland, and very fortunate to represent Ireland here in the Parliament. But when you take both those spins on it, then the relationship Germany has on behalf of Europe, or has had on behalf of Europe, particularly in the Merkel years, at a foreign policy level, has been one of great stature. I think I agree with both here. That has showed quite rigorous output, been maybe playing from a Merkel side cards close to her chest for many years, but always pro-European. Whereas now, to Emma's point, I was a bit underwhelmed with Chancellor Scholz's speech yesterday. Bear in mind, I'm a bit biased because I have been, listening to former Chancellor Merkel for so long. I wanted to see a Germany that was as ambitious on issues like migration versus just calling for countries to come together. I would have loved to see more leadership there. I would have loved to see more deadlines in place when we talk about the enlargement process, because we got to also remember Germany's a big player at the big table. But yesterday gave me an opportunity from an Irish perspective, and as Emma rightly pointed out, as smaller countries we have opportunity now to form a stronger allegiance, to make sure pro-European ambitions are put on the table, and not only rely on the big brother, or what I would have formed as the big sister in Germany for so long, to carry weight. Where that plays out with Macron in France, I think he's trying to step into that role a lot more. But yeah, overall, I was a little bit underwhelmed. I wanted more leadership, but understanding in the context what he offered us was a space to grow into and snatch as smaller member states if we want to be brave enough to do that too.
I mean, he has been thrown into this situation where the war came, relatively.
In these uneven times, you really need a heart and a brain. And I think Macron is the heart of Europe. And Scholz has shown that he's a brain of Europe, that he's responsible for this Europe, that he wants stability, that also it was a very symbolic thing, that he mentioned also what at this day was happening in Moscow, the Victory Day, the Putin celebration. And then you have this Europe Day, and his speech, that was so symbolic, at least for nations like Poland, which really feels the danger of the war and understands that there won't be a secure Europe without stable, independent Ukraine. That was so important for us.
Just we have conducted an interview with Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament, and she said something, what I think very remarkable, and you guys have certainly heard it before, about maybe one of the biggest political consequences of the war in Ukraine. And take a listen.
By unanimity in the European Council, all heads of state and government, all 27 member states came together and said, we would like that Ukraine becomes a member of the European Union. That was the strongest message that could be sent in response to the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine. But it is beyond that. It is a message that when a country looks to Europe as its home, then Europe opens its doors wide open.
Let me get that straight here again. When a country looks to Europe as its home, then Europe opens its doors wide open. Emma, does that sound realistic to you?
I know it's very realistic, but it sounds very beautiful to me. I think that is what Europe should be, a home for democracies, a home for Europeans, and home is where the heart is. So I sympathize very much with that message.
Robert mentioned the migration issue before, and he also mentioned Macron. I want to add, who says German leadership also says France. What about this German-French engine, without which no vehicle in Europe can move? Is that still operational under Scholz and Macron?
I mean, is it as strong as what I would assumed Merkel and Macron was? Perhaps not, but I think to the point that was shared, I think we have no choice but to make sure France and Germany are collegiate. And I think that's an incredibly important message. And picking up even from President Metzola's point there, we are at a turning point, and that's an exciting time, as long as we have the moments where all 27 member states, or those that are looking to Europe to call home, like Ukraine, like the Western Balkans, like Serbia in particular, when they come around the table, that bravery is not just lost in the sound bites or on the floor of the plenary, or from Roberta Metsola in terms of an interview, that the bravery happens at that council, because there's a lot of pieces of legislation and a lot of movement of people, and big decisions need to be had now in the next year, and not just because the European elections are on the forefront, but they have to happen in order for us to be ambitious from a green perspective, in order for us to be ambitious in terms of migration and the asylum pact. So we need that bravery to be felt there, and certainly Macron and Scholz need to be the ringmasters of that, and I think that's a fair enough point.
I think it's amazing also how the war united us, and how fast and swift we adopted sanctions, got together. I mean, as Metsola said in the interview, the leaders asking for support for Ukraine, not only support, but actually membership of Ukraine. And I think that's really strength, and it showed us how effective and strong we can be when we're operating together. But on the French-German dynamics, I think they show a little bit of different types of leadership and leadership skills, if you may. I mean, as you said, heart or brain, I let that be unsaid. But I think the German leadership is very much about walk the talk, not so much about talking passionately and give great speeches, because I agree with you, Maria. The speech itself was not visionary or wonderful from a rhetorics point of view, but it was strong in terms of what was said, not how it was said, but also what has been delivered by Germany. If we look at that, they really removed Russian gas from the German energy system in less than a year, from over 50% dependency on Russian gas to 0% today. They cut gas demand by 20% without scaling down on the economy. They did something that is incredible leadership that the rest of Europe also needs to do, and they're really walking the talk, doing what needs to be done. They're not making big fuss of it, and I think especially in Sweden, the story has been not so very well reported about, but they're really doing what's necessary and doing what it's taken. I think that's great leadership shown from Germany.
Robert, Poland has shouldered a lot of the burden when it comes to Ukrainian refugees. Poland has also emerged as a leading voice when it comes to European defense, and by now everybody knows that Poland has one of the strongest armies in Europe. So a lot of things where your country gets credit for. Yet 2 or 3 years ago, Poland was still the pariah. Does that prevent Poland from becoming more of a leader in Europe? What does Poland need to do to, be like Germany or France? Just play in the European game, and this is not the case. Poland is the 5th country by economy, by population in the European Union. But the case is we are not sitting by the table. And we did it, we asked for that. Our government has done a lot not to sit by the table with Macron, Scholz and the others. And this is a great mistake which we are paying for now. I just remind you, Poland has so far not adopted the recovery and the resilience plan. We have €0 for investments from European Union so far. So this is the price we are paying now. We would be much stronger, and the effect of Poland as an ambassador of interest of Ukraine and also other countries waiting for this leadership of Poland, because this is the strongest country on the eastern part of European Union. So all these countries waiting for this leadership.
And not having it, we are all paying price for that, because we have all what is needed to be one of the leaders in European Union, and we are just losing the momentum because of this anti-European, anti-democratic, populist government which is not respecting rule of law, human rights, democracy.
Very interesting. Thank you so far for a great conversation. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, the European Parliament ratified the Istanbul Convention, the legally binding international instrument to combat violence against women and domestic violence, 6 years after signing. That's next on Brussels, my love. Stay with us. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. Our guests are still Emma Wiesner, Robert Biedron and Maria Walsh. Let's move on to our next topic, the ratification of the Istanbul Convention by the European Parliament this week. It sets out comprehensive legal and policy measures to prevent violence against women and assist victims. Do you think this is not urgent? Well, think again. Here's what the Swedish presidency, the Swedish Minister for Gender Equality, to be precise, Paulina Brandberg, said recently. 1 in 3 women in the EU has experienced physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. As long as this heinous situation persists, we will not be able to make gender equality a reality. All right, Maria. What do you make of this? Is this a reason, the ratification, is this a reason to celebrate, or is it almost embarrassing because it's so late?
To be honest with you, it's a bittersweet moment. You know, the bravery that we talked about in the first section in terms of Germany and other member states. I often, as a 35-year-old young European, I'm often left wondering what is taking so long. And like normal, we see it worldwide, not just here in the European Union. It's women, it's young girls, it's minority communities like the LGBTI community that often gets used as these political chips. And I think this, I know this is a sad case of that. The fact that we don't have enough ambition here, that we didn't see this Istanbul Convention passed many years ago. It's sad, and just picking up from what we shared, you know, there's countries that haven't ratified it yet, Poland being one. And
Poland has ratified. Sorry.
But
they want to withdraw.
Sorry, they want to withdraw. Excuse me.
They would not do that.
I was about to spread misinformation, so I'm glad. But can I just say from that side, it is not a reflection of the communities that are in these countries. And that's what's bittersweet. Yeah. This is politics at its worst. And the fact that it's always, as I mentioned, women, young girls and minority groups that get left, right. and almost erased of its importance, I think is a disservice to a growing European Union.
You mentioned that there are still 6 member states that haven't ratified the document yet: Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Lithuania, Slovakia and Latvia. Now, just to give you an idea about the thinking in those countries, the president of the Latvian parliament, Edvards Smitens, recently said, and I quote, "There is no single convention or directive that can protect people." Well, if that's the case, we can all go home and watch football, right, Emma?
He would be unemployed.
Yeah, God. Europeans are not free if all citizens aren't free. And I'm proud that as Maria said, it's bittersweet. I'm proud that we're doing it, but it's very much too late. And when you have unequal representation among politicians, you get unequal politics and unequal policy. And I think this is very much a reflection of that, and what happened, what took it so long. This is about everyone's rights to feel safe within their home, and there are cross-European dimensions of that. The member states not ratifying it, it's bad excuses, I would say, all of them, why they haven't ratified it. And I'm just glad from a citizen's point of view that we're now doing it on European level, finally showing that it's also European responsibility.
Will the pressure increase now on the countries that haven't ratified it yet?
I hope so. because the violence against women and girls is a reality. We're living in a world where, as you mentioned, 1 in 3 women in European Union has experienced physical violence or sexual violence. It's 62 million women who estimate. So it's more than people live. In Italy, 55% has experienced sexual harassment. This is the reality in 2023 in a union which wants to be the union of equality, which many around the world regard as the safest place in the world. And there you are. And if you feel it doesn't touches you, then think about your mother, your grandmother, your sister, your daughter. They might be the victims. It might sooner or later come back to you. And that's why it's a shame that I participated in this debate. And I heard these men, and I thought dinosaurs died long time ago. And there they were. Those guys were speaking about the men. The men were speaking about gender ideology, gender monster. Come on, man. This is about your mothers. This is about your daughters, your wives.
Maria, you said it was a bittersweet moment.
Yeah.
What if the Latvians are right and the directive will not improve the situation? Is the document, the language in the document, is that enough, or could have...
Well, to Robert's point, I mean, where we are from the dinosaurs' perspective, I'm going to take your language here. You know, the Istanbul Convention was a significant step for equality, not by all, not right now, not felt by all, only by some, predominantly men of Caucasian skin. The issue is also this week we would have heard from Jackie Fox, a woman who's trying to create Coco's Law, so making anything that happens online the exact same in terms of offline, cyber violence, cyber doxing, the essence that we see these images being released without the consent. So when you take the Istanbul Convention and where we are now in terms of the online world, the Istanbul Convention, if it was ratified at the extent it needed to be a number of years ago, we would already have legislation in place where we needed to be, like Coco's Law that we have in Ireland, working across the EU member states, protecting women and young girls that we see absolutely tortured online. And this is only going to expedite. We see decreases in mental health supports then. When you're looking at the second leading cause of death right now in the EU is death by suicide, then you have to look at something that, if we are not, again, back to that word ambitious, across all legislation, when we're talking about women and girls and minority groups, then what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's just questioning policy in general then. I mean, if we say that it's not enough, hence we shouldn't have it. I mean, of course, we need to believe in politics, and what we're doing here is making a difference. The Istanbul Convention is not perfect and more needs to be done, but it's still huge steps forward. And just the fact that they don't want to implement that or ratify that, it's scandalous.
The good news is that we as European Parliament, we are working on the European Commission proposal on directive devoted to solving this issue of cyber violence, among others. So this is a good news.
Good news. All right, that's all we have time for on that topic, I'm afraid. A great conversation so far. Thanks to our panel here in the studio, and thanks to you watching. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, our weekly talk show about the week that was. And the week that was saw the European Parliament calling for the overhaul of the EU school scheme that supports the distribution of milk, fruit and vegetables to millions of children. The aim, of course, is to provide kids not only with healthy meals, but also educational measures and information. The reason is that children eat too much processed food, high in added sugar, salt and fat. All this against the backdrop of rising obesity in society in general. Recently, due to the pandemic, the distribution of healthy food has decreased fruit and vegetables by 22% and milk by 38%. Emma, is that the strengthening of that program a no-brainer?
Absolutely not. I voted no. And I will tell you, because for me, it sounds like a very easy question. Of course, children should eat more fruit and vegetables. But is this really a topic for the European Parliament to solve? So for me, this is highly ideological. What is the right level to legislate? Of course, I want to see healthier meal, less processed food, but this can be done on, if not national level, regional level, even local level. We have had discussions in this Parliament this week about should we have plant-based alternatives, how should the juice machines look like, how should this should be distributed. We will have EU regulation regulating what type of milk children will drink in school. That is not a topic for Brussels politics.
Okay.
I completely disagree for the first time with Emma.
Finally.
I come from Poland. I understand what is the child poverty. And our government has not so far done enough to fight the child poverty. Almost 20 million children in the European Union live in the risk of poverty. This is more or less the size of the country like Romania. We need action, and I used to be a mayor, and I know that mayors care about that, but it's very often that at the national level you don't have enough of engagement, I would say, diplomatically, and understanding on the need to supply this kind of action. And that's why I think that this scheme is perfectly fitted for solving so many issues. And the shame is that it only delivers 20% of need. This is a shame, that only 20% of students from nursery to secondary school
the score is
are
now
able to
1-1.
It's going to be 2v1. I'm sorry.
We have
on which side, Maria?
we elegantly came from fighting obesity to fighting poverty.
Yeah, it comes in hand. I would agree, and I voted in favour of this in a week that, in every week that we discuss food security, and the fact that we have child poverty, as was shared, absolutely skyrocketing, close to 20 million. You mentioned obesity rates. We're seeing that well above 30% for boys, just under 30% for girls. And if we are not tackling this at a younger age, in terms of nutritional education, in terms of providing good source food to people who, unfortunately, in our European Union in 2023 cannot afford it and cannot access it, then again, we are talking about citizens suffering now. Citizens are going to be absolutely suffering when we look at 10, 20 years on, when we have lack of workforce due to nutritional decay or mental health because of no access to quality good food or good sleep, which again goes hand in hand. It is a circular economy when we look at that in terms of nutrition and health of a body. And I think it's a disservice if we're allowing young people not to have access to good quality food. And I absolutely agree that it's a part of our legislation power here.
All right.
If it doesn't persuade
sorry, we're
millions of children from Ukraine benefited from this scheme.
Robert,
when they arrived to European Union.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for this lively discussion. That does it for us today on Brussels, my love. I'd like to thank our guests again for their contribution, for their insights, and our audience for watching. And if you want to reach out to us, you can send us a note to brusselsmylove@euronews.com with comments or ideas, or on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, for example. I'm Stefan Grobes. See you soon here on Euronews and euronews.com.